Okay, okay. I'll ask him to.
Okay. Ask him to check with Krishna.
Sure, sure. I'll do that.
Um, Everyone, please check your YouTube link. Go to Tide India and check whether the live stream is ongoing.
YouTube
Ashwin,
live is working.
Ashwin, I'm audible, right?
Yes, yes. Arjun, you're audible.
Okay.
Uh, Anjali, can you please check the attendees list? I think Vishwanath sir is there. Hello, Vishwanath sir.
Hello.
So we
Good
will
evening,
start
sir.
at, yeah, yes, good evening. We will start around 3:55 sir.
Sure.
Sir. Oh, Rishi sir.
Hello. Shall I just check out whether my presentation is working or not?
Sure, sure, please.
Yes.
We are able to see you. Kindly share your screen, sir. We will see.
Hello, Vishwanath sir. How are you?
Hello, surviving the big bad world.
Yes.
Your
Yes.
screen is visible, sir.
So it's
Ash-
visible. It's visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Rajesh.
And it's moving, right?
Yes, sir. It is moving.
Perfect. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Ashwin, should I share my presentation or you will be doing at your end?
Jeevan,
Even
can you
it
please
would be
share the
better if you
presentation?
share your presentation. We have a backup of your presentation, but then it would be good if you can
Okay,
share it.
I'll do that.
How do you, Rajesh? All good?
Sir, all good. Thanks for agreeing to come on this. I know we spoke a while ago, but
Rajesh, you are not
Bangalore
clearly
has been
audible.
hogging all the limelight, so perhaps we thought we will change course and highlight something else for the change.
Rajesh, can you check your mic? It's not very clearly audible. Although I can hear,
Can
but
get
it's not.
closer to the laptop. I'm guessing it will be better now. I'll just increase my volumes. I guess it's better now.
Still not so clear. Yeah, better than before. I think it can get better, but I think it should be okay.
By the way, sir, we started on lake restoration thing with Ramprasad sir in Chintamani.
I know. So
Yeah.
they're ready to get the funding anytime. So the CSR fund is coming.
Oh, ours, we got the funding. It's just that we got delayed starting the work due
I see.
to all the usual things. And yeah, I guess we should starting. I think the boundary fixing itself is taking time. That's the most contentious part.
Yeah.
So I think he should be joining the call as well. Yeah. So Prasad sir is only helping us with that. See how that goes.
That's that Malahalli, right? Malahalli.
Yeah, Malapalli. It's
Malapalli.
Malapalli. Yeah. However.
That's our Malapalli Sudhakar, our MLA and.
ಹೌದು ಅವ್ರ ಮನೆ ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆನೆ ಇದೆ ಕೆರೆ. So he was ready to do it, but now we know the contentious land issues that are there around that. We have to be tread cautiously.
So good on. So then we'll come on the limelight whenever it's required, right? During the panel discussion. So I'll switch off the video and allow the rest to the eyes of people who would watch.
How much time do some of us have? Like 10, 15 minutes or so? What's the latest?
15 minutes, I guess, Rajesh. 15 minutes.
Okay. Fine. I planned for 10. So
Brevity is the soul of it. Good, Rajesh. You'll save 5 minutes for the rest of us.
Jeevan, what about Krishna? Has he joined?
Krishna said he will join at 3. Let me give him a call. I'll do that.
Okay.
Ashwin, Jeevan, good afternoon. Just checking if I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah, you are here.
Yeah.
Hey Casey, how's it going?
All good, man. How are you? Long time.
Yeah, I know. Looks like you're joining us from a different part of the world.
Yes. Yes, I
Shows in
am.
your background too.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Like 3 hours behind, right? Netherlands. 3 hours behind, right?
Yes, yes. Very true. How are you doing, Rajesh?
Good, good.
You moved
How
to
did
Well Labs now?
Yeah, I've been with them for about a year now. So
Okay.
Rajesh figure out from the background? I'm wondering.
I don't know. He has more geographical understanding.
Hello. Hi, Madhvi ma'am. Madhvi ma'am, you're on mute. Hello.
Hi.
Madhvi ma'am, can you hear us? Is it audible?
Yeah, I can hear.
I think there's some sort of network issue from your end. We can't hear you clearly.
Is it audible?
It's
Is it
breaking in
audible now?
between. Yeah, like audible, but it's breaking in between. Is it just for me or for Rajesh, you as well? Can you hear her?
yeah, little breaking, madam.
You can talk.
Is it clear now?
It's clear, I think.
ಈಗ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ correct ಆಗಿ. So we are almost on the dot then. But
Yes.
I guess you can give a minute or so. There's like what, 42 participants already?
Yes, we can
The
see
waiting
42.
room. No, not bad. Some audience.
We'll wait for another minute and then we start, right?
Yes, sure.
Okay, I think we will start now. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on creating water secure towns in India. I am Sapna Manjunath, your moderator for the day, and I'm an urban planner at BORDA South Asia. Small towns in South Asia grapple with water challenges like overconsumption, groundwater depletion, and inadequate infrastructure, which is worsened by governance issues. In collaboration with BORDA, Well Labs, and Tide, supported by BMZ and DCB Bank, we conducted a study on water management in the city of Chintamani, which is in Karnataka. Today, we're hosting this webinar to illuminate our findings and to elevate the dialogue on water security in small and medium towns. This webinar will showcase the virtual launch of our report, which is titled Mapping Water in Small Town, Data and Insights on Water Management in Chintamani, Karnataka. We also have a lineup of distinguished speakers who will share their expertise and insights on various aspects of water management in small towns. We'll also delve into topics ranging from water balance studies to district level initiatives as well as wastewater management. I would request all the attendees that as we proceed with the presentations, to submit the questions in the Q&A box. We will be addressing them towards the end and after all the speakers have concluded their presentations. So without further ado, let's start with the inaugural presentation. So the inaugural presentation features Mr. Jeevan Roy, who is the Senior Urban Planner at BORDA South Asia. And today he'll be providing insights into the overview of small town water management. Jeevan is an engineer and urban planner with over 7 years of experience in urban development. He specializes in water, sanitation, and solid waste management. He also provides technical, strategic, and capacity building support across various government levels. He also engages with diverse stakeholders for wash and solid waste management initiatives. He emphasizes on community involvement. So without further ado, let's dive right into our first presentation. Jeevan, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Sapna, for that big introduction. So please tell me if my screen is visible, and we have 15 minutes time, right, Sapna?
Yes, 15 minutes.
Okay. Is my screen visible? Is my screen visible, Sapna?
Yes,
I hope
yes, Jeevan.
I've shared. Okay. So please give me a timer. Tell me if when we reach around 12 minutes, I'll try to finish the presentation as soon as possible.
Sure.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'll skip the introduction as Sapna has already mentioned this. Before getting into the core part of the presentation, I'd like to give a brief about our organization. So BORDA is a German-based organization. We work in 6 regions across the globe. My team particularly works in BORDA South Asia. And as part of BORDA South Asia, we have 3 countries, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Since last 3 to 4 years, we have been working in 8 small towns across South Asia in these 3 countries. And we aspire to at least work with 30 to 40 small town municipalities in the next 3 to 4 years across different level of engagement. So this is the brief about our organization. So I'll next move on to the core content of the presentation, which is like overview of water management in small town. So in order to give this understanding, I have divided this presentation into 4 main themes. Again, there are different challenges with respect to small town water management. With respect to these challenges, these are the 4 buckets that I would be talking about. One is the effect of urbanization in small towns, and the effect of urbanization and also the climate change for resource management that is there for the small towns, and different key indicators that are there with respect to wash service level in the small towns, and the policy attentions and the governance structure that is there for small towns. These are the 4 key aspects that I would be discussing about. So moving on to the next one is urbanization in small towns. Again, we all understand that around 40% of the India's population lives in urban centers. And this is likely to double. Basically, 50% of the India's population will be living in urban center by 2050. That's the estimated number by World Bank. So with this increase, what is the effect of this in small towns? As we all understand that of 4,000 odd statutory towns in India, close to 95% of these statutory towns are small and medium towns. So when I say small and medium towns, these are basically towns which are non-metropolitan or non-corporation, non-city corporation. So these are basically city municipal councils or town Nagar Panchayat or town Panchayat that we are talking about. So 95% of these towns are small and medium towns. Another important aspects that we should be looking at is census towns as well. These census towns are categorized as these has urban characteristics but governed as a rural entity. And again, there are close to 4,000 odd census towns in India. And an interesting fact is in the year 2015, MoHUA has taken out a notification urging all the states to convert the census town into urban local body. And since then, there has been 15% increase in number of small towns through conversion of census town into ULBs. So what happens when all the census towns gets converted into small and medium towns? So basically, we have around 4,000 small and medium towns plus another 4,000 included. So basically, number of small towns in India will be 2 times the current number, which will be close to 8,000 small and medium towns that we can see once all of these census towns has been converted into urban local body. What will be the impact of this on water supply requirement? So once the census towns, since they're governed as an rural entity, the per capita mandate is around 40 LPCD. Once this has been converted to urban local body, the demand increases to 70 LPCD or 135 LPCD, thereby increasing the water demand of all of these 4,000 odd newly formed ULBs in the near future. And this will have a huge impact on water demand and also the infrastructure demand that is required for these particular towns. So this is the kind of impact that we are looking at through a urbanization point of view. The second one is depletion of water resources. Again, this is the impact of urbanization plus the climate change, we can say. And there are many reports which suggest that there has been decrease in the groundwater levels. So one report by WRIC suggests that 54% of India groundwater wells are decreasing. If we look at surface water as well, a report by Niti Aayog in 2018 suggests that 70% of the India surface water resources are polluted. So this is primarily from the domestic wastewater that is directly being discharged into the lakes. So there is a general decrease in the water resource availability or the quality of water resource available in India. So what kind of impact this will have on the small towns is, if we look at the groundwater dependency in Indian urban centers, 50% of the urban water needs is catered through groundwater resources. This is the case in India as well as Karnataka as well, to be exact, around 48%. So again, if you look at the graph, so this is an analysis of the census data and also taken from IHS report in 2013. We can see that the number of households, percentage of households which are directly dependent on some sort of groundwater resource increases in small towns. You can see class 1 and class 2 towns with 20 and 35%, whereas the smaller towns, class 3, 4, 5, and 6 cities, has the range between 39 to 42, 47 as well. So there is increasing dependency on groundwater resources in small towns. Given the previous situation that groundwater levels are decreasing, there's a huge amount of risk involved with increasing dependency of groundwater in small towns. Even surface water as well. So this is an article published in 2019 by Deccan Herald. Around 1.6 crores population living in Karnataka in 231 towns are dependent on surface water source. And the article highlights that tier 2 cities and small towns in Karnataka are facing acute water shortage. So I'm not saying that these kind of water crisis is not there for bigger cities. It is also like sort of there for bigger cities. But in terms of crisis, the initial response or the response given to the bigger cities is much higher compared to smaller cities. So the latest example is Bengaluru. The crisis Bengaluru is facing is similar. The small towns around Bengaluru is also facing similar crisis, but Bengaluru gets the highest attention from all level of governments because of the nature of the city, higher GDP, etc., etc. So hence, this could be a major challenge for small towns in the longer run, depleting water resources. So moving on to some key indicators with respect to wash service levels. Again, there's a huge disparity between service levels that are there in bigger cities compared with smaller cities when it comes to piped water supply. In South Asia, access to pipe water supply in smaller cities is 3 times lower compared to bigger cities. So this is in South Asia, this somewhere small town is 9%, the bigger cities is 27%. The gap is slightly lower when it comes to India, 0.6 times lower in India, which is like larger cities have around 70% access to 70% of the household have access to pipe water supply, whereas small town has only 41% access to pipe water supply. The situation is much worse when we look at wastewater management in small towns of India. You can see the graph on the left side of the slide. So this is the data by Niti Aayog and CPCB in the year 2022. The gap for percentage wastewater treatment capacity increases in small towns up to 95%. You can see that's the class 2 towns with population 0.5 to 1 lakh. So this is basically 3 times lower than million plus cities, which is 10 lakh plus cities, and 5 times lower compared to metropolitan cities in India. And 90%, this is alarming number, which is 90% of the wastewater that is generated in small towns coming out of small towns is not being treated and directly discharged outside. And this is one of the major reason that we can attribute to the previous data sets that I had shown earlier, which is 70% of the surface water resources are polluted primarily from the domestic wastewater discharge. And moving on to some key service efficiency related indicators. Again, urban per capita supply in India varies. This is in the range between 37 LPCD to 298. This is mostly in the larger cities. We could not get specific number on small town at a national level, but our experience working in 8 towns in the last 3 years is that small towns has a per capita LPCD range from 40 LPCD to 100 LPCD. And again, the national average for metering, water supply metering is about 13%. Like our experience from 8 towns is absolutely no metering in any of the towns that we are working. So water metering is almost non-existent in the small towns that we are working with, which is directly linked with the cost recovery aspect, which is very poor. And another aspect of non-revenue water, again, you can see the disparity. Larger cities have anywhere between 30 to 40% of non-revenue water, and smaller cities have 40 to 50% as reported by Urban Development Department in 2012. And most of the losses is majorly through leakages and pipe leakage and losses. This is one disparity that we see between bigger and smaller cities. When it comes to inequity in access to water supply, one study that we did in Leh, this is one of the highest small town in India. We could see that around 75 to 100 LPCD has been provided to tourists and locals who largely belong to higher economic area, and around 25 to 35 LPCD given to provided to migrants. So again, this is the case in few other small towns that we are also working. In Chintamani as well, slightly, this will be presented by Rajesh as the next speaker. So this is largely regarding the key service level indicators with respect to water and wastewater management in small towns, which compared to bigger cities is not doing so well and has in a serious condition. Next, moving on to policy and governance aspects of it. When it comes to governance, looking at the institutional arrangement for water supply and sanitation projects. Again, this is an example from Karnataka. You can see from the table that all the capital works, which is largely planning and implementation of water and sanitation projects, are done by parastatal agency or the state agency. Once planning and implementation is done of a particular project, this will be handed over to the ULB for operation and maintenance. And also the revenue generation, role of revenue generation will fall upon the ULB. The issue with this is most of the decision making happens centrally at a state level between few organizations, and the urban local body does not have much say when it comes to planning of these infrastructure. Once these infrastructures are established, this will be handed over to the ULB, thus transferring the financial risk of operating this infrastructure to the ULB. So this is one of the major issue. We can see that the infrastructure status of small towns are suboptimal or in dysfunctional status currently in many of the small towns. So this is regarding institutional arrangement. So we quickly did a quick assessment of the national schemes that are there in India since last 20 years. This is very specific to urban development scheme, and the ones which are focused on providing water and sanitation, and some components. For example, missions like Hriday, they don't fully cover water and sanitation aspects, but cover certain aspects of it. So there's basically 7 urban development schemes in the last 20 years in India. If we look at the focus of these development schemes on bigger and smaller cities, 3 of these schemes, for example, Amrit 1, Smart City Mission, and Hriday directly focuses on bigger cities, whereas another 4 schemes, Amrit 2.0, Swachh Bharat Mission, etc., they focus on both small and bigger cities. So if we deep dive into these 4 schemes, not all the schemes, but one of the major schemes, JNNU-RM, which we had, considered one of the biggest urban development scheme, ran for 10 years. So if we look at the funding allocation part of it, 70% of the funding of the program has been allocated to bigger cities, which had a population coverage of around 48%, whereas 30% of the fund allocation was given to smaller cities with much greater population coverage, around 60%. And there are,
you have 2 more minutes.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt
Thank you,
you.
Sapna. And there's no specific urban development schemes which specifically focuses on small towns at a national scale. So this is one of the policy gap that we have. Again, not taking much time here, just wanted to show this is again data set from Janagraha. What we understood that smaller towns, most of the Indian cities, are at least 3/4 of the urban centers in India do not have a master plan. When we come to specific aspects such as sectoral planning, which covers our, a water action plan, city sanitation plan, etc., etc. So small towns do not there's a relatively lesser mandate for smaller towns to have these sectoral planning. So without these sort of planning, small towns will not have a longer vision in order to achieve their sanitation or water supply goals. Something interesting that I wanted to present here. Again, cities are planned for 135 LPCD. Even the smaller cities are planned for 135 LPCD. This is as mandated by CPHEOO. But if we look at some of the major water usage activities like washing machine, toilet flush, shower, urinals, etc., etc. Over the period of time, there has been decrease in water consumption in all of these activities. So again, this is just a question I just wanted to put is, can smaller towns function in lesser per capita LPCD, let's say 75 or 100 LPCD. Again, I understand that this mandate has been given by CPHO primarily based on the kind of sanitation services these cities have. But even when you look at the sanitation services, can we have a sewer system or sanitation systems which can function well at a lower water supply rate? And also, what will be the impact of having a lesser per capita demand? So just basically wanted to understand between 135 or 100 LPCD or 75 LPCD, what will be the environmental impact and the financial impact while planning for the small towns? This is one thing. Again, key messaging, many things I wanted to say, but just as 3 things on the top of my mind is, one is small town challenges are not complex as bigger cities. Again, given the nature of small cities, these are still small in scale, not so very complex. So we still have time to invest on these towns and to get the service level much higher up. So basically, we can still reverse the condition. The major challenges situation that we are facing in small towns can still be reversed. That's one messaging. Second one is, again, this is the understanding that we have got working in at least 4 towns with respect to water. Again, often we hear from everyone that water, there's a shortage of water, but our project understanding is that there's no water crisis, but a water management crisis. So can we, with the available resources, can we like somehow plan to effectively manage these water resources and cater to our small towns? And the third one is the policy attention that small towns requires. Again, as I mentioned in the previous slides, there is no one specific schemes from the central ministry regarding small towns, and also there is no differential policies that are there for small towns as well. Whatever policies that are applicable for bigger cities are also applicable for smaller towns. So what I suggest is small towns should be looked differently than bigger cities and should have a differential policy and should get specific schemes for urban development for small towns as well. The major key messages that I wanted to leave and also sort of end this presentation with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Jeevan. It was very insightful. We also have a few questions already, but then we'll take it up towards the end after the rest of the presentations. So up next, we have Mr. Rajesh Ramamurthy, who's an urban water consultant at Well Labs. So today he'll be unraveling insights on the role of water balance study in small towns, particularly Chintamani. Being an interdisciplinary practitioner, Rajesh has spent over 8 years trying to figure out what it takes for governments, both at state and regional level, to push the needle forward on water and sanitation by carrying out pilots, working with stakeholder groups, building ICT tools, and supporting the enabling environment. His engagements have been in the states of Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and recently Karnataka. Rajesh, the screen is yours.
All right. Thanks, Apna. And I hope my screen is visible and I'm going to jump right in.
Yes, it is.
Just going to do a quick time check here. All right. Okay. So I think thanks, Jeevan, for setting the context. Yeah, I'm representing Well Labs today. Well Labs is a fairly new organization that's focused on primarily research impact in the space of land and water sustainability. We did the study together, as Ewan was mentioning, focused around Chintamani together with BORDA as well as Tide. And this is what we are actually going to launch as a report. Some of you may have probably read the report ahead of this webinar, but that's what I'll try to cover in my presentation and talk about the key insights that we found. So I'm going to jump right in. Just going to take a moment. All right. There we go. So just setting some context in terms of what are we talking about? Where is this located? It's located about 75 kilometers north of Bangalore. Typically, this is also very much part of the Chikbalapur region, which you may have heard is part of a semi-arid landscape. So this is one of the towns there. And some more context around the town itself has a projected population around 92,000 odd. The residents receive water almost once a week, typically, if we could say on average. That's really what the situation is like there. And a little bit around the methodology and this thing, you can read more about it in the report, but we briefly carried out the study between June and January. And of course, we worked on refining some of that through consultations with the CMC and many other stakeholders. And in terms of I showed you where it's geographically located, but where is it from a hydrological river basin standpoint? In fact, it's one of the upper catchments of the Pala region. That's what you see marked in red. That's the town boundary. And if you can see the Pala river basin is in its entirety, that's really where it's located. Now, this is the crux of what we'd like to share today. This is one of the very first visualizations of what Chintamani's water balance and water situation looks like. In fact, we've improved on this infographic since we did the study because there was a water supply scheme that came in. So I'll delve into some of the key aspects and numbers here, but the attempt with this is, of course, just going beyond what is demanded under different schemes, right? You have schemes such as Amrit, which already demand a water balance plan. Our attempt is to actually try to go beyond it. So that's why you see some elements which are not typically present in there, which is trying to quantify rainfall, the amount of runoff that you generate, how much recharge you can get from lakes, where are the catchments for the lakes, how much runoff is coming into those lakes. All of that gets added in, and we present this pretty picture. I'll delve into aspects of it in the upcoming slides. First, I wanted to take off from a very important point, which I will sort of carry through my entire presentation. So this is a rainfall chart that's representative not just of Chintamani, it's quite representative of Karnataka itself. So what the pattern I typically want to highlight is you have these 2-3 years of excess rainfall, and then you have these 2 years of, so basically you have this alternative situation of really excess rainfall and then drought. So if you look at it, the last period was 2018-19, which is when entire Karnataka really suffered, including Chintamani. And if you see that, of course, 2023, we all know what the situation is, and we're all hoping for better rainfall in 2024. But just hold on to that thought. I'll tell you why this is particularly important. And what I wanted to highlight is 2021 and 2022, in fact, had really excess rainfall. What this meant for the town is what I'll try and unpack in my upcoming slides. If you look at the surface water sources for the town itself, what's interesting is, of course, as I said, initially when they started off for the longest time, they had one single surface water source, which is the Chintamani Lake that's on the southwest part of the town. But as I mentioned, they recently, in the last year, they're bringing water from 15 kilometers away from kere called Bhaktarali Arsi Kere, which is bringing in about 2 MLD, projected to be 3 MLD. So about 3 MLD of their surface water supply is coming from lakes per se. Lakes or kere, how we'd like to refer to that. Now, flipping and looking at the situation in terms of what's happening with groundwater, right? So this is a map. So when we started to work in the town, we started to collect data around borewells. This is just simply municipal borewell data that we've attempted to plot over a period of time. So if you can see, actually, what's very interesting is, of course, all of these borewells are quite spread across the town. You may find some concentration, particularly in some regions, maybe around the lakes in particular. Some of these borewells are located outside of the town, where they actually have it in neighboring villages and bring in the water to the town. But the other point I'd like to highlight is one, I talked about the 2018-19 and what happens in that period is, of course, they attempted a lot of borewells, but there was really a high borewell failure rate. Perhaps the understanding of the aquifer characteristics is there. All we typically know in terms of, in situations of crisis, let's put more money, let's dig more borewells, but perhaps we should be more judicious about it in terms of where we put these borewells and how we can manage things better. And the other point I'd like to highlight is, of course, do we see a pattern in terms of the depth of the borewells per se? But you actually see when you look at the, hopefully you can visible, the map's fairly visible, that you can see that the borewells with different depths are located right next to each other. So you can have something 1,000 feet right located next to one which is 500 feet, which is also showing the dynamics of groundwater in particularly the Deccan Plateau. And they get about average, they're drawing about 3 to 4 MLD of their water. That's municipal supply that's coming there. And then, of course, you have private supply, which is also relying on borewells. So that comes up to about 5 MLD. And what we try to do, interestingly, this time is, of course, given that picture of borewells where we're trying to unpack this more and trying to understand what can be done to understand this better. Chintamani is not a lot different in terms of its aquifer characteristics. It's quite similar to Bangalore, in fact, having an underlying hard rock aquifer. But what we try to do here is actually try to see, as we know, hard rock aquifer has typically a lot of layers. And what we attempted to do is use a resistivity survey, which is a typical geophysical method survey that's used for understanding what's happening below the ground. And what it does is actually give you resistivity values. So basically you set your electrodes and measure the potential difference between the lengths. Say if you're able to take about 100 meters, then you can typically look at what's happening below the ground at an equivalent distance. And actually, based on the resistivity values, you'll be able to infer both the depth and the thickness of layers under the ground. So what the map on the right actually shows you is what is the weathering, what's the thickness of the weathered layer in the aquifer. As some of you may be familiar, the weather layer is what we will use typically for storage, right? You can maximize your storage, act as the capacitative layer. Typically, the weathering layer is very important for that. Below that, of course, you have fractures, and then you reach bedrock. So the idea of doing this is trying to understand, okay, if you had to put recharge structures for the town, where could it be most beneficial, right? Typically, we have lakes, but are there other spots which we can identify where the weathering layer is thicker and we can maximize its potential for storing water? Distribution and consumption, this situation is no different from many of the other towns. I think Jeevan referred to it. We did a small sample survey, about 427 households across the town, and found wide variation between them. Non-revenue water, as we all know, what was very interesting, of course, is the high number of unauthorized connections. You have only about 8,000 odd household connections, and then you have 20,000 odd properties, big disconnects there. And that obviously means that collections, water charges and all of that, those projections go way off track. What's also thing is the town doesn't have many major industries nearby. And in fact, the commercial and distribution establishments and institution demand is fairly less. So really the big demand here is from households themselves, which is the population about 90,000 odd. And just going towards the wastewater situation in the town and what's happening with that, is that it's very interesting in some way. So actually the town actually built their whole wastewater sewerage network in phases. There's an STP that you can see at the right. But what's interesting is that the STP was constructed downstream of a lake. So anytime any of the lines get not functional, which typically we know happens, then the sewage enters the lake. That's what you see an image of right above that. But what's happening really is because they have a sewerage network that covers the town, and which you can see through this map that's illustrated on the left in terms of the percentage of how much is basically the darker green indicates that it's untreated, and the lighter green component indicates that it's treated. What's happening is the sewage that's taking the natural slope, the sewage is flowing into the lakes. So if you remember the previous slides, we had lakes which are north of the town, and all the sewage is actually flowing towards that, and as a result contaminating the biggest lake. In fact, that's spread over 100 acres, called Nekundi. Sewage is entering from the town. As a result, the lake is pretty much unusable as a point. I know there are some plans to make it better and probably even propose IND as per one of the new schemes, but we'll have to see what happens. I wanted to, we talked about some of these problems are very familiar with not very different, and but I wanted to point out that, okay, what does it mean for a small town which such as Chintamani, right? Where are they actually spending money? So we actually tried to look at their budgets, and in our brief understanding found out that 40% of their operational expenditure is on an average is being spent on water supply. Of course, some of this water supply expenses are primarily around electricity charges, which are being subsidized through the State Finance Commission. But it's interesting to see where is actually the spending taking place, right? So if we have to change the narrative around towns, we need to start looking at where is their expenditure, how can this be better, and where should the money go in, and how much money do they have left for actually O&M. So this paints a picture of saying where their expenses are going. You can see some of the data up on the slide. I wanted to summarize a lot of what I talked about in this one slide. You can see a lot of the findings that we had summarized here. I just wanted to talk about one thing which Jeevan briefly mentioned, which is around the planning. So when we attempted to actually piece things for Chintamani together, for example, you have so many different, we have the Water Supply and Sewage Board that is responsible for planning large schemes. Now you have the KU IDFC, which is another body that's responsible for Swachh Bharat Mission. And then you have the DMA and the DODC, which are responsible for state schemes. So if you actually went and asked the the CMC, unfortunately, a lot of the times they don't know exactly what's happening with Amrut, because you have to go to the Water Supply and Drainage Board. And if you wanted to construct a budget or a plan for this thing, you really need to involve all these agencies together in order to make a picture complete. So that presents some of the challenges in terms of planning or operating and maintaining systems. I wanted to end my presentation on a more positive note, even though I highlighted a lot of the issues. So we just took a stab. In fact, this is part of the report in terms of what would a future for Chintamani look like. So I've talked about the present situation, which is 50% coming from groundwater, the remaining coming from surface water. So if they continued on this trajectory and actually altered their trajectory, they continued to use the Bhaktharali scheme to receive 3 MLD. They cleaned up their water bodies that could provide up to 50 MLD, 50% of their water supply, which is about 4 MLD. And what they can then do is use the groundwater table to actually act as a buffer. So they can use it for a buffer during the regular season. And obviously, when the rainfall is not so great, that's when they can rely on the groundwater. And of course, there's the question about treated water itself. When it's treated to a reasonable level, and once the STP that's planned is put in the place, you have about 5 MLD available. There's some potential for reuse within the town. Else, there's greater potential for reuse within the agri pockets that are situated across around the town itself. So this is just an imagination of what I want to leave you with, that, we've talked about the issues, but let's look at what the future of Chintamani could look like. And with that, that was it about what I had to say today. Back to you, Sapna.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. We see a lot of questions in the Q&A box as well as the chat box. You could either answer them by typing down the answers, or we could take them up in the end after the rest of the presentations. So without further ado, let's move forward, and we'll have the virtual launch of the report now. So let me just share my screen because this is a virtual launch. Okay. So the report is titled Mapping Water in Small Town, Data and Insights on Water Management in Chintamani, Karnataka. Can we please have... yes. Can we please have virtual claps for this? So we'll have a virtual flip through of this report. We would like to extend our sincere gratitude to the Chintamani municipality as well as KUWSTB for their unwavering support throughout this study. And this collaborative effort was made possible by the dedicated teams at WellApp, Tide, as well as BORDA South Asia, with the support from BMZ as well as DCB Bank. So we'll just go through the flip through of the report. So this report is available online. We'll be sharing the link on the chat box. So you will be able to view the report through the link.
Samna, I think you can just share the
Yes, I will.
report in the chat box. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the end of our report. And like I mentioned, the report is available for download on the provided link and can also be accessed by scanning the QR code displayed on your screen. And for any further inquiries, please feel free to reach out to either Rajesh or Jeevan or Ashwin. We'll put up their mail IDs on the chat box as well. So, thank you. Okay, moving forward, let's delve into more of our expert presentations. Our first presentation will be delivered by Mrs. K. Madhvi, who is the Commissioner in Charge and Executive Engineer at Chintamani CMC. She will be sharing her insights on district level initiatives, sustainable access to water in Chikballapura. Mrs. K. Madhavi is a civil engineer with nearly 2 decades of expertise in water, wastewater, as well as sanitation. And she has served as an AEE in various municipalities, and she currently holds the position of executive engineer at DODC Chikballapura. She also serves as the overseeing commissioner for Chintamani. Madhavi ma'am, the screen is yours.
Good evening. As she has addressed my introductory, I would not proceed with the introduction. So moving straight ahead, now small towns, they play a pivotal role in the holistic development of the nation. In terms, you have some pressing issues such as water supply and sanitation in these small towns, which need to be addressed immediately. And these issues, once addressed, they appear the way to a healthier and a sustainable society. Despite the problem in the local municipalities is, despite we possess surface sources, these small towns are extremely dependent on the groundwater sources, such as borewells. And same is the case in case of Chintamani, wherein the borewells are being used excessively. The biggest challenge here is to fulfill the existing demand through the depleting resource, through these depleting resources. Now, going ahead, I would present the situation of Chikballapur district. Now, in Chikballapur, we have around 6 urban local bodies, which have 4 CMCs and 1 TMC and a TP. Now, here we have 4 surface sources in the Chikballapur, Chintamani, Shedlagat, Gauribinnur, and Chikballapur, Chintamani, Bagepalli, and Gudibande have surface sources. Despite having surface sources, we combinedly utilize the surface sources and the groundwater sources. Nearly 587 borewells are existent in our district, and these 587 borewells are being put into use. And as against 135 LPCD, we are right now able to cater to the population only 80 LPCD. And there are around 151 wards in the whole of the district. In these 151 wards, we are able to supply in a frequency of 1 to 3 days for only 46 wards. And the rest of the wards are being supplied once in a week. This is the situation wherein we are handling the existing availability. And then now, this being the scenario, I will go ahead with the Chintamani because the topic itself about Chintamani. Now, Chintamani, we have a LPCD requirement of around 12, whereas we are catering only 6 to 7 LPCDs. One LPCD from Kanampalli Kere, and 3 LPCDs from Bhaktaralli Arsikere, and almost 3 LPCD from the borewells. Now, the situation in Chintamani as such is that we are able to provide them water once in a week at a frequency of once in a week. Now, the biggest challenge here that we need to address is why we are lagging or we are not able to provide at least 3 days or 4 days a week is, though we have almost 50% availability of the LPCD requirement. So out of 12 LPCD, we almost have 7 to 8 LPCD, but still we are able to give only 7 days or 8 days. The problem lies with the gaps in the distribution networks. We have to plug in these gaps and the problems. There's an uneven distribution as such, wherein most of the the water supply from the lakes, it is going into the pumping stations from the WTP to the pumping station. But what happens with the borewells is most of the borewells are not connected to these WTPs, and these are being directly supplied to the wards. So you do understand, when we supply to the wards, there will be an uneven distribution in terms of the timings. Some wards, they might supply up to 2 hours and some 3 hours. Because there's a human intervention here, there are 2 kinds of losses, water losses and power losses as well, because the electricity which we are using is wasted in case the waterman fails to switch off the motors in time. And these might be the general, because of the human intervention, we have these losses, which is very much inevitable as such, because they are working under certain stress of the local councillors and other things. Next, we have the issue is with the O&M. there's a problem with the O&M as such, because the government doesn't give us funds for the O&M. We have to self-sustain. That is the whole crux of municipal administration, that the O&M has to be sustained by the local municipalities, and they have to develop this sustenance model. So in this case, what is happening? We are spending a lot of money on the O&M and the power. Now, unless we develop a proper management plan, what is the need of the hour is a water audit has to happen. The water audit in terms, we need to maintain the inventory, in the inventory of the water lines, or the key map itself is not available with most of the municipalities. We don't know where our distribution lines are there. We know on field, but for a better planning, what do we need is a proper inventory and a proper planning of these of water. So hence we'll need a water audit. And in this line, we have already requested TIDE to handhold us. And other than these, I think we can, unless we provide the 135 LPCD or at least 80 to 90 LPCDs, though the demand, the need is for water meters, we cannot insist on water meters in the urban local bodies, because we are not giving them timely water supply. Though in theory, it is said that we need water meters to avoid water wastage. But in the most of the situations in the municipalities, water meters will not work unless we give them water at a frequency of at least 2 to 3 days. It will not be a norm that will be accepted by the people itself. Then, so we need to have a proper water management plan. Now, what is the situation in terms of drought? There's a huge cry in Bangalore regarding the drought. Jeevan, if you can go back to the drought situation slide. See, I've just collected the data. See, almost in the past, from 2001 to 2016, and going ahead, we had drought in 2018, 19, and the present drought in 2023. These are all the talukas that have been affected by the drought, and Chikbalapur is almost there every year. So Chikbalapur is mostly affected by drought. This situation is happening year on year, and Chintamani as such was widely dependent on water tankers. There would be huge supply of water in terms of water tankers. But this year we have able to control this, and we have reduced the water supply through tankers by utilizing the private borewells. The district administration has come in in this way. We have executed agreements with the private borewell owners, and we are utilizing the private borewell. So there is a curve on the water tankers. As such, the water tankers is also not an acceptable norm for the present living standards. Who would like to go and stand in the streets with the pots or with the buckets to just fill the water? So this is not an acceptable norm nowadays, at least the tankers. So the district administration is trying to completely avoid water tankers and manage to the private tankers. Then coming down to the key issues. Jeevan, next slide. Jeevan, can we go to the next slide? Now, as district administration, what we are also targeting is we are only able to provide 70 to 80 LPCD in all the 6 towns. But we can't target 135 LPCDs, but we can always we are aiming at least providing them 90 to 100 LPCD, because 4 of these towns, that is Chikbalapur, Chintamani, Shidlagatta, and Bagepalli, these are all the UGD towns. We need the minimum flow to maintain the sanitation and the proper functioning of these UGDs. And then we are also focusing on water supply augmentation, as our previous speaker spoke. Now we have targeted the Napundi Kere in Chintamani, wherein it has been completely dried out because of the drought as well. But we are cleaning it. And then the Kanampalli Kere is also ready. And we are also increasing the capacity of the Kanampalli Kere. The project itself has been approved, and it will be taken up by the Karnataka Water Supply and Sewerage Board. Now, this is the problem with the continuous utilization of borewell water. We are completely utilizing the borewells, and we are totally dependent on it. And there is no break for this. So we are trying to cater in such a way that the surface sources are utilized and the borewells will become and can be utilized only in the emergency issues, emergency times actually. Now we are also planning in terms of all the ULBs that we make ourselves available with the inventory and the key map, and all these water supply lines are connected to the distribution networks. Through the distribution networks or the OSTs or the sumps. What? And there's a lot of wastage. So this is being tackled by the district. I call upon the think tanks, the subject experts, all of you is we need capacity building. So our people, they need the technical know-how. If you can handhold us, and you can also give us the solutions. We can try and bring about all these, because already some good government schemes are in pipeline, and Amrut has been approved, wherein the new areas and the new wards will be covered. Almost around 119 crores has been given by the government. So this tender is on in the pipeline, but here only the new areas will be taken in, and the missing links will be joined. But what the need of the hour for us is water audit.
Okay, I guess we've lost.
We
ma'am.
have finished my so I finished this address by calling upon all the think tanks and the subject experts. We do need your expertise and your know-how, and please handhold us in going in a further better way and planning our water resources properly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhuri ma'am, for your insightful talk. It's always valuable to hear perspectives from the government side. Next, we have Mr. S. Vishwanath, founder and director of Biome Environmental Solutions, who will talk about water-sensitive planning in small towns. Vishwanath sir is a civil engineer and urban planner with over 36 years of experience in the sectors of water, wastewater, and sanitation. He is an adjunct professor at Azim Premji University in Bengaluru, and he's also the trustee and the director at Biome Environmental Trust and Biome Environmental Solutions. Vishwanath sir, the screen is yours.
Sapna, just let me know if the screen is moving.
It is, sir.
Perfect. So thanks for all the introductory talks, which have set the ground beautifully, and even the report is very comprehensive. So I won't dare to repeat what's happening there, but I'll talk about some of the solutions that we found in small towns abutting Bangalore, Devanhalli in particular, but also a town municipal council called Hunsumanhalli. So I'm saying looking at lakes, groundwater, and shallow aquifer towards water security of a small town. Well, all of us know that there's a huge economic cost or a burden to bad sanitation and bad water, and that's very well known. So the health risk of it all should also be assessed when we assess the water and wastewater circulation in a town. We should just look at the health burden that is coming on the town itself as a form of costing. We've already talked about the service level benchmarks a lot. I think we need to revisit it very much for small towns, and we have to agree on a number which is between 70 and 100 LPCD, depending on the resource availability and depending on the sewerage network's capability of self-cleansing velocity, so that we are able to design schemes which are proper. Now, what happens is, in the absence of being able to design for 135 LPCD, many projects are themselves not taken up because there's no source at all, and even sewerage networks are not taken up if there's not 135 LPCD of water, right? So these are the service level benchmarks that we have, which is what we are aiming for. That was for water. This is for wastewater, 100% coverage, 100% efficiency in wastewater collection and treatment. High sounding words, but very difficult when it comes to realization on the ground. And also, when we look at water and wastewater, we need to look at solid waste in the towns, because solid waste management also ends up in our drains and lakes and in the shallow aquifers. So all three have to go together: water, wastewater, and solid waste management. Stormwater drainage network is also something that we need to focus on when we're looking at towns, because these are channels which will take the water to the lakes, hopefully to the lakes, so that the lakes are full and then are able to recharge the network. So the SLB will give us a good way of drawing up a water balance, because the water balance is not independent of the solid waste management and the stormwater network designs too, because they then have an impact on the water balance. So the other particular issue is, how do we work on democratic reporting at ward levels? How do we get people at ward levels to think about solutions, not just create a dependency on the town itself, but look at water as something which needs to be fixed at local levels too, and how can people enter into those conversations? As has already been talked about, Amrut 2 for the first time is pushing for city water balance plans and city water action plans. There's also a great push for aquifer management and aquifer mapping. So then we seize this moment to build the capacities of the town to be able to drop city water balance plans and city water action plans. Can the towns themselves understand and be part of the process of drawing up these plans is something. The other question to answer is the city in the river basin, right? So what is the role of the city in a river basin? What forms of water from a river basin are they entitled to, apart from local waters? Do they have a share of the larger river basin itself and some water from large surface water bodies? So, for example, Kolar is now going to get water from the Markandeya Dam, which is downstream, but which is a more reliable surface water source. So overall, local waters and river basin waters have to talk to each other, and planning will have to be done for small towns, both keeping in mind their position in the river basin and also how they're going to draw water from local water sources. So the local waters, has already been pointed out, as groundwater. And groundwater, we easily understood it as deep borewell water. The problem with deep borewell water are twofold. One is that the deep borewells tend to be of high salinity, right? This is a huge problem. They require a lot of treatment before they can be put to use. Plus, they have a huge energy burden, as has been already pointed out. They need 15 HP, 20 HP kind of pumps to lift water from what is now 1,000 feet or 1,400 feet. So we have to look at all these four forms of water, and demand management is something that is ridiculous to talk about in a town which is getting water supply once in 7 days. But overall, if some part of the cities or town is getting excess water, can that be managed so that others get equal or a more equitable share, right? So this is something that has now come up new in the Amrut one, where we are talking about urban aquifer management plan. So this aquifer understanding, which Well Labs has attempted, that framework of that understanding should be also made part of the discussion of the report itself. How did you go about doing the survey? What were the components you surveyed? How should a town which wants to do an aquifer management plan, how should they go about it? I hope it's already there as part of the Well Lab reports. If it is not there, then that should be included, because towns need to be capacitated to understand aquifers more strongly and from an internal perspective also, so that we are clear about it. It's not some outside expert coming and doing it for that. So some of the experiences that we saw, and these are also shown in Chintamani too, I've seen. So in this town municipal council called Hunsamarnhalli, which is just outside Bangalore on the way to the airport, 6 dug wells were revived. 6 dug wells were revived by us from Biome Trust with the help of the TMC. And in 2 of them, the women said, don't put a pump. We'll go to the well and we'll draw the water, right? They said, don't put a pump because you'll over-extract the water. It will go to the apartments and to the richer households. The well will go dry and we will not be able to access water at all. We will go to the well and draw the water as much as we require. Their argument was this: most of the small town people are getting their potable water from RO systems, where they pay 5 rupees for 20 liters, right? So that is their drinking and cooking water source. So here, if you get 4 bindiges of water or 4 pots of water from the open well, that's saving them 20 rupees a day. If the water quality of the well is maintained and is made sure that it's potable by a small disinfection, then that's the kind of support they get. But because we can't think of alternate supplemental sources, our systems of water supply design are designed for pipe network 135 LPCD or 70 LPCD. Even the Jal Jeevan mission is designed as a tap in every house and 55 LPCD in the house. How do we look at community assets, where people go to the water and draw water, however much is required, and how is that to be fitted in as forms of water security? Though it may not meet the full norms of 55, 70, or 135, it's a critical question that we have to ask ourselves and integrate these community assets as part of our water security solutions. So here, for example, that was the lady who insisted that don't put a pump in it. So we put a safety grill, we put 2 police, we made sure that disinfection of the water is happening with chlorine tablets regularly, and about 50 households come and draw water. And even now in this severe drought condition, depletion of water in Bangalore city, these open wells have water. And women are taking water from 20 feet, 18 and 20 feet, right? How do we understand this flushed aquifer and allow communities to engage with water security is a question that we have. And in this particular well, people have put in pipes themselves and are drawing the water and taking it to their homes. This aquifer is capable of servicing a slightly higher volume because its transmissivity is higher and its storage is higher. And this one, for example, gives about 2 lakh liters of water a day. This is just next to the national highway on the way to the airport. And this is provided already about 80 million liters to the town municipal council of Chintamani. The tragedy is that this is very cheap water. It's also very easy water, but because there's no pricing system or metering system, all those apartments that you see behind will take this water for free. The TMC is more or less giving it for free. So how do we not only focus on the supply, but also make sure that the supply is compensated for by a charge which is levied on the waters? And in the absence of a meter, that 120 rupees per month charge, how is it collected? And how is signal sent so that the water is used judiciously is a question that we have. But we found great potential in these sub-aquifers in particular regions. The other question that we ask ourselves, which we've done so in Bangalore, is how do we nudge people for better behavior? For example, can bylaws nudge people for rainwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, groundwater recharge, metering for themselves in their own house? One of the things that we did in the wells that I showed you, which are being connected to the town municipal council, is we put meters, water meters to these bore wells and to these wells themselves to understand how much are we drawing from these wells, right? So that gives us some handle on the draft and therefore some handle on the recharge based on the levels of the water in the wells. So how do we push regulations so that people participate as part of the solution? Can we do dual piping for richer households in small towns? Can rainwater harvesting be made mandatory, for example, for apartments or ground plus 1, ground plus 2 constructions? Can they be nudged to collect and recharge rainwater through bylaws? Is a question that we have to ask ourselves. And metering and tariff. How do we actually drive this? In the absence of even collecting a tariff, can we at least understand the volumetric consumption of each household, right? And get a handle on the number of what people are consuming per capita is one thing. So let me just dive into this example of Devanahalli, which is closely connected to Chikballapur. It's in Bangalore rural, but it's on the way to Chikballapur. And Devanahalli is a town with 40,000 to 45,000 population. Devanahalli's water supply, like in Chintamani and many other towns, was based on 110 deep bore wells. The deep bore wells have gone to 1,400 feet. They use 15, 20, 25 horsepower pumps. They're high TDS, more than 1,900 to 2,000 TDS. The water is completely not potable. Though it's supplied by a pipe network, people use it for non-potable domestic water supply. For potable supply, they go to the 17 RO systems. This is the existing feature of Devanahalli town. And it's 40 kilometers from Bangalore. But next to the Devanahalli fort, which is dated to 1501, is Synergies, a small water body, a small lake. As you can see on the figure on the right, the farmer is washing his feet. Behind is the lake, which was bone dry for 14 years. The town worked with various NGOs, including one called Environmental Foundation for India. And the top figure is the town desilting the lake. The NGO desilted it, EFI desilted it. And then linked it to the catchment. And the figure below is the lake in its present condition. As on today, the Synergies is full of water. In the rainy season, it's rainwater. In the non-rainy season, it's treated wastewater, which comes from what's called the HN Valley project, which is supplying water to Chikballapur district and is filling 65 tanks with about 130 million liters per day. This is how the lake looks like, Synergies. It's full now, treated wastewater and a blend of rainwater. The treated wastewater also is diluted in the lake called Bagalur, which precedes this. So it's twice diluted treated wastewater in Synergies. The lake itself is being monitored for Class A and Class B norms. So we make sure that it's Class A or Class B norms in the lake water body. So we have some norms for surface water bodies as to what class they should be if it's to be used for drinking water purpose. There was a well next to the lake which was fully filled up and with garbage, and they were able to completely level it, the town municipal council. Luckily, we were able to spot it and revive the well. The well diggers are reviving the well. This is how the well looks like now. So the lake is full. The lake pushes water into the shallow aquifer, and the well is now full of water. This well is capable of yielding 2.5 lakh liters of water, 250,000 liters of water in a 12-hour pumping cycle. It recuperates in 12 hours. This is now with a safety grill, and it's now the source of water, domestic water supply, a supplement to the town of Devanahalli. The lithology, as was presented by Rajesh in this particular part, so lithology varies from place to place. Here, you have about 40 meters of weathered zone. So What it means is that the shallow aquifer is up to a depth of 100 feet. This gives us an advantage to be able to tap to 100 feet, and I'll tell you how that happens. So studying lithology in very small pockets is also crucial for us to do it. And so that lithology helped in driving what are called filter bore wells. What you see on the top two left are bore wells, which are 18 inches in diameter, driven down to hard rock, about 100 feet, 95 to 100 feet deep. And then a slotted casing is put in the center, and then it's filled with gravel on the sides, so that the weathered zone rock, shallow aquifer water, comes in through this gravel and through the porous casing, and then it's pumped continuously. We put a meter. We figure that these wells yield between 4,000 to 6,000 liters per hour, constant flow, 4,000 to 6,000 liters per hour. The meter is important because it helps us understand how much water we are drawing from that shallow aquifer. So this system has now been rigged up with a 130 micron filter, a disc filter on the top left, a multimedia activated carbon filter, middle, top right UV sterilization, bottom chlorination. All of it is metered, and it meets BIS 10500 drinking water norms with a TDS of about 350. So this is the first time that the pipe network of Devanahalli is getting actual BIS 10500 norms. Otherwise, the pipe network supplies water from deep bore wells with higher salinity than 2000 in many parts. So therefore, what we need to do is to look at how recycled water can fit into the overall plan. In the case of Devanahalli, it's treated water or treated wastewater from Bangalore, which is filling the lakes of Devanahalli. The potential for Bangalore, with its 2,250 million liters per day consumption and generation of about 2,000 million liters of wastewater, is that all the surrounding towns in Chikballapur, Kolar, Anikal, Ramnagaram, Bangalore rural can all receive treated used water to fill their lakes, to be able to recharge the shallow aquifers and make sure that the water security for these towns is met with. So the big advantage which we found for Devanahalli with the treated used water approach was that the energy per kilometer dropped dramatically. You see the comparison between an open well, a filter bore well, and a deep bore well. So there's a huge reduction. The cost per kiloliter of water pumped from these wells and from the filter bore wells is 1 rupee 23 paisa or 92 paisa per kiloliter, right? So when you get to these kind of costs, then it reduces the burden on energy bills, it reduces the burden of water costs, makes water affordable for many towns. Now, if you put a meter, and if a household consumes even 20,000 liters or 20 KL, the monthly bill as per the water cost would be less than 20 rupees. So actually, they're paying 120 rupees. So if you are able to get the aquifer full and the aquifer high and open wells and filter bore wells for water, you will not only get very cheap water, good quality water, but also energy efficient water and less carbon emissions also. So climate resilient water is what you will get if aquifers are full, either with rainwater or treated water. And then, so the monitoring is crucial. So this is being monitored on a weekly basis, and it's done rigorously by IISc and as well as private laboratories, and we make sure that it meets norms of drinking water. This particular case, because it's blended with deep borewell water, the TDS has gone to 650, but which is well within 1,000. But typically in rainy season, it drops below 500. So the thing is that every town is different, and every town has to be looked at very specifically. And this common pool resource approach, thinking about institutions which are going to manage the water, how do we solve problems rather than keep on depicting problems? How do we embrace diversity of solutions, but then be specific to that particular town and listen to the community and people? For example, we learned from the filter borewell drillers that this is an easy way of drilling borewells to the shallow aquifer, and if you're able to recharge the shallow aquifer, you're able to get the water. That self-government is possible. All the systems designed can be operated by pump operators, 2 pump operators of the town municipal council without any extra load. And how do we adapt to changing power, changing collective ownership and human beings? Designing the lake so that it still continues to provide livelihoods for fishermen. There's bird biodiversity. Then there's the recharge of the aquifer for the hydrology to kick in and water to be supplied to the town. So we design for livelihoods, biodiversity, and functionality. And how do we create institutions which are capable of tying all these together? And there are no panaceas, and complex city does not mean chaos, but small towns will have to find their own innovative solutions as they go along. It's what I wanted to share from both Devanahalli and Chintamani of the kind of applied experience. And perhaps we can work with Chintamani also to try and see whether the HN Valley project can be of help to Chintamani town. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vishwanath sir. It's always a pleasure hearing from you. Last but not the least, we have a presentation where we close the loop. Mr. Krishna C. Rao, advisor at the Wash Institute, will talk about circularity in action, wastewater management and reuse. Krishna C. Rao is a development expert with over 20 years of experience in sanitation services across Asia, Africa, as well as Latin America. He specializes in fecal sludge management, waste management, and energy access for underserved communities. He has advised governments on policy, developed business models for resource recovery, and also focused on solutions for safely managed sanitation in urban and rural areas. Sir, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Sapna. I hope you can hear me and see the screen.
Yes.
Thank you. It's very difficult to do a presentation after Vishu, who provides you actual hardcore on the ground information. I'll try to keep my presentation a bit simple, because I was initially, when Jeevan approached me, I was a bit lost what you wanted me to present on the circularity, because I was not going to talk about either Karnataka or Chintamani, where I have not worked. So Jeevan posed to me 3 questions and said, can you address these 3 questions? So his first question was, how should we manage used water in small towns? How do we plan for reuse of used water? And what should be the policy and regulatory interventions at national and state to promote reuse? So I hope most of the audience here knows that the government of India has coined the term used water instead of wastewater now. And I'm going to answer these 3 questions from my own personal experience and the work that we are doing on the ground for all these 3 questions here. So if we start looking at the small towns and how, answering the first question, how do we plan for used water management in small towns? So let's look at first, what does small towns mean? So as per Government of India, based on how they are funding for used water management, they have said small towns are anything below 1 lakh population, because above 1 lakh population, it is all addressed by Amrut, and below 1 lakh is going to be addressed by SBM 2.0. And within this below 1 lakh, if you look at, you have 5 other categories of town from class 2 to class 6. And if you just focus on class 2 and class 3, which are 20,000 population and above, that's where I think there is a larger challenge in solving the used water management. Because for class 4, 5, and 6, I personally believe we should go the rural way. Rural has done significantly, proper guidelines they have come out with on solutions on how used water management can be managed. And the same can be applied there, which is basically looking at community soak pits, managing at the drain end point through simple nature-based systems. But when we see the SBM 2.0 guidelines, what the guideline says is, you need to have sewer at the central core area of the city, which at the minimum covers 50% of the population. And as you look into the periphery of the city, it is recommending on-site sanitation systems. But at the same time, it is recommending that while on the on-site sanitation system addresses your black water, for the gray water, which are flowing in the drains, you have to do IND-based system and connect to the STP. So from the theory, if we try and see, SBM 2.0 guidelines has tried to push all types of used water management solutions, looking at sewer, looking at non-sewer sanitation as well. But when we look at what is happening, SBM 2.0 was launched in October 2021. It gave a budget of 1.41 lakh crores. And state had a significant contribution towards this budget as well. That was the expectation from the SBM 2.0 guidelines. While SBM 2.0 guidelines, alludes towards pushing towards sewer a lot more, which is held as the gold standard in terms of solving all the used water management, and primarily from the risk perspective. If we look at solely from the risk, we do sanitation because we need to address public health and environment. And from a public health and environment perspective, sewer gives you that, it addresses all risks per se. But when you compare the other solution, non-network sanitation, there are perceived risks in it. Now, today, when we see many states which have submitted city sanitation action plan, because they could not put down the cost that they have to contribute towards development of used water management solution, many have proposed IND-based solutions. And since 2021, Only now, recently, in the last few 6 months, there have been some of the small towns, they are issuing the tender. So what we see here is the biggest challenge that the cities are facing is they're not able to meet the financial demand of this proposed solution. And there are also capacity related issues. If we jump into the theory, what type of solutions that are there? So you can look at treating used water, black water separately, gray water separately, or you combine with black and gray water. So when we do black water separately, gray water separately, we typically call them non-sewered sanitation. But when you do the combined black and gray water, that's where we call it the sewered sanitation. What we feel is, rather than our cities come with many diverse typologies. So, our cities already has existing solutions. Many households and even cities have made some sort of partial investment towards managing used water, towards managing the used water. And we also, when we look at the local conditions of our cities have, diverse hydrogeological condition, the population density varies, the water supply, we've already heard in the previous presentation, the source of water supply, the per capita water supply, all these varies a lot. And within that, our small towns have their own, key strategy requirements. Some are tourist towns, some are industrial towns, some are influenced by socioeconomic issues, some have climatic issues that are their priority. So when we look at all this, and if we see the SBM 2.0 guidelines that is being asked by the cities to implement, it kind of feels that we are suggesting one size solution for all. However, that is a big challenge to execute on the ground. What we need is all these type of solutions, both non-sewered and sewered, and we need to ensure 100% of used water management is addressed, but with the right mix of solution. But when we say 100% coverage with the right mix of solution, the biggest question arises is, what is this right mix of solution? How do you arrive at this right mix of solution? So I'll just give a very quickly run through a story that we are trying to do in 9 towns across the country. And we have selected this 9 towns. All these towns falls under class 2 and class 3. These have diverse kind of typology in these towns. The only thing I would say we missed out in selecting a town here was a town from a complete arid zone and from a hilly region. And if you look at the quick statistics of these 9 towns, what we see is the population ranges from the minimum is 20,000 in Bundu, and it goes as high as 76,000 in New Barakpur. So I will quickly show you some initial data points that we have collected from these 9 towns. These are very preliminary data that we have got from these towns, and we are still analyzing them. So we did a proper statistical household survey, both for bulk generators and non-bulk generators. And what are we seeing, the story that is coming out from the data? Now, when we look at the black water side, what we are seeing, it's a well-known, we all know that majority urban area, we always used to say, they have septic tank without soak pits. But what we are also finding in many of these towns is many small towns have built septic tank with soak pit as well. We don't have Karnataka here on this list, but if we were to look into Karnataka, I'm sure the number of single pits numbers would have been much higher. Similar story we are seeing on the bulk generator side as well. Now, when we look into what is happening with the desludging practices, in most of these towns, the desludging practices goes beyond 10 years. And many of these towns, when we ask the household, when you last desludged, the answer is never. So when we link the previous 2 data points, so on one side, we are seeing septic tank with soak pit and septic tank without soak pit. And on the other side, when we look at the desludging, especially for septic tank without soak pit, that means when it's without soak pit, the black water is flowing into the drains because the overflow of the septic tank is largely connected to the drains. And if these septic tanks have not been desludged, that means there is significant black water and highly contaminated black water is flowing in our drains because there has hardly been desludging in here. Now, when we see the water supply side, what we are seeing, and this story we've still not fully been able to grapple with, in most of our small towns, we are seeing that people are relying on pipe water supply and also on borewell. And here, what we have also seen is many households which are reliant on pipe water supply, they also have other sources of water. Our quick math that we have done on what the LPCD is coming to, we have seen it ranges from 130 to 500 in some towns, like especially in Golpara and even in Mapusa in Goa. We are seeing some of the households consuming beyond 1,000 LPCDs as well. Now, when it comes to the grey water side, so we saw the black water story, now the grey water side story. We always assume that households are discharging grey water into the drains. But what we are seeing in many of these small towns, there are soak pits being done, and many households are discharging their grey water into kitchen gardens, what we call, and there are also community soak pits. So when we look at this, what it tells us is, we plan that, for in a city, we always use these thumb rules to derive it, what is the quantity of wastewater that is generated. But in reality, what is that wastewater in the end we are going to capture and treat? It's a very, very different story altogether. So to look into it, we started looking into even every drain endpoint. So I will take the story of Bundu and tell you the story on the drain endpoints that we have observed till now. So Bundu is a town which is of...
So we have 3 more minutes to wrap up.
Oh, okay. So I might take a little bit more time, Sapna, sorry about it.
So
in the case of Bundu, it is a population of 20,000. And in the population of this 20,000 town, here we are seeing a water table pre-monsoon is about 15 meter and post-monsoon is 10 meter above the ground level. So in this town, we have identified totally 16 drain endpoints in the town. So your drains eventually end at some place in the city. And many of these drain endpoints are either going directly into open land or some of them are going into water body. So we actually did an assessment also, what is the actual flow, water flowing in these drain endpoints. And based on this, we did this kind of Sankey diagram looking at what is the overall flow of used water that is happening in the town Bundu. And what we saw is, if you were to do a theoretical calculation, what is the used water generation, it comes to almost 2 MLD. But in reality, if you look at what is flowing and the kind of investments the households have made on the on-site sanitation system, and also the city, which has made an investment in FSTP, etc. So what we see is, in terms of safe disposement, almost 1.2 MLD is being safely disposed, and very little of it is actually you can capture for later on reuse as well. And what the actual we are able to capture in terms of the wastewater generated in Bundu is it only comes up to 750 KLD. So that's the investment that we are looking at for Bundu. And then further, when we try and see, do a catchment analysis. So in this map, you will see that, of these 16 drain endpoints, you can map it to 3 of the outfalls based on the catchment analysis. And we noticed that in each of these outfalls, you can get anywhere from the least to be 67 KLD to up to 400 KLD is what wastewater that can come in these catchments. So based on this, if you do a ground up exercise, what we notice is your kind of used water management intervention that has to come will be quite decentralized. You will have some 400 KLD STPs in 2 of the DEP, some and smaller KLD STPs for other drain endpoints. And there will be some IND structures that you have to invest. So this methodology showed us that, if you do a ground up exercise, sewer generally does not come as the solution required for the city. So what we are trying to develop is, so if you really have to plan a used water management for a city, you should start looking at a risk versus cost-based approach. If you go through a conventional approach, which is sewer will always be the answer. But if you start applying the risk versus cost approach, where you first look into do an assessment, what the current practices are and how those practices can be retrofitted, what is the risk of these current practices, and you address those risks and optimize the existing infrastructure, and then develop the infrastructure which is adaptive to this existing arrangement, your whole cost required for doing the used water management is significantly less. So just to throw the number for, in the case of Bundu, what we have noticed is to do a sewer-based management, the government of India is currently giving 2,000 rupees to up to 3,000 rupees per capita. In the case of Bundu, you will need well beyond 7,000 or 8,000 rupees per capita to do a complete sewer. But if you take this risk versus cost approach, we are seeing that we are able to come to about 2,000 to 3,000 rupees per capita on the overall capital investment required to address the used water management. So I'll skip this slide. These are the decision matrix that we are developing from this whole thing. Now I'll come to the circularity part. Now, when you look at the circularity aspect, we all know that wastewater has organic matter, nutrients, and water in it. And this can be looked at capturing to make different products. But let's just keep to the water side. On the water side, you can look at wastewater being reused for agriculture, within industries. Within industries, you can look at the precision industries or the regular industries. And based on the type of end use, your quality of treated water required significantly changes. I'll take through a story of Panipat, where we developed this whole reuse plan for the Panipat city. Panipat city has a 6 lakh population, so they generate about 60 MLD of wastewater. What we did for Panipat was we did a land use mapping of wherever these STPs were located. And based on the land use mapping, we identified what are the potential end users where this treated wastewater could be done. So we took 3 such STPs, one STP for treatment at IOCL Panipat, another STP for Panipat has a huge textile cluster, so providing the treated wastewater to textile cluster, and then the third one, the STP in Jatal, which was going towards the peri-urban agriculture side, so looking at the agriculture reuse. So we looked into the industry side by looking at design the business model where private sector will make the significant investment for tertiary treatment plant. In the case of agriculture, we looked at 2 models, one looking at the water swap and the auctioning. And then we also did the urban reuse. So, giving the water for construction industries and for landscaping and to the parks as well. So what our economic analysis showed in Panipat, the fresh water priced for domestic is rupees 1.1 per kiloliter, which is significantly low. And freshwater price for industries is at 18.24 rupees per kiloliter. So for an industry, typically, they need high, textile industries requires a high grade water. So ideally, they require a reverse osmosis kind of system to get to the tertiary treated standards. So, but if they had to put the reverse osmosis, the price that they would have to charge for fresh water would come up to 42 rupees per kilometer. That would drive the economic viability. However, if they don't want high quality water, and if you just do through simple ultrafiltration method of tertiary treatment, then they could achieve viability at rupees 9 per kiloliter. Same thing we looked into the agriculture reuse as well. And in the agriculture reuse, what we saw was the auctioning model was just not working out because the entrepreneur would have to sell water to farmers at rupees 9 per meter cube, where today the farmers are hardly paying. But in the case of water swap, it showed some potential of higher economic viability. The only challenge there was today Panipat is supplying fresh water at 1.1 rupees. They should increase this freshwater price significantly, and the agriculture water swap was working out if the charge was at 5 rupees per kiloliter. So I'll just transition to the policy part, what this tells us the story. So we were involved also in developing the National Safe Reuse of Treated Wastewater Framework, which NMCG has already published. That was at the national level policy. Today, we have more than 17 states which have already prepared treated wastewater reuse policy. And already many cities also have bylaws on that they have adopted on on-site wastewater treatment and reuse. The challenge, what we are seeing with respect to upscale of reuse is, so on paper, we have very good policies. Everything it covers, even the national SRTW framework covers. Even if I look at the Karnataka wastewater reuse policy, it covers all the salient points. Only thing I would be a bit critical of Karnataka policy is it only suggests for class 1 and class 2 town. I would try and make it for the entire state, irrespective of urban and rural. But what we are largely seeing is the challenges of upscale of this reuse policy and its implementation on the ground. And largely it stems from these four aspects: the public awareness, compliance with the standards being a big issue, integration and coordination, because you have now multiple stakeholders who are involved in the reuse side. And then finally, the financing and viability. So my big takeaway and suggestion that what we should be doing for to really scale the circularity aspect is, first, we need to look at operationalizing India's SRTW framework that is already put in place. So all states should ideally look at this policy and revise their respective state policy. Many of these policies, including the SRTW framework, they don't have enough teeth in them because these policies do not have sufficient enforcement. And these enforcement, they need to think through by providing proper incentives and penalties. They need to enforce mandatory targets. Wherever they have enforced, reuse of treated water has to happen. They need to come out with no freshwater zone usage guidelines. Something we need to look into what Maharashtra is doing right now. They are trying to come up with water reuse certificates. Just last 2 weeks back, they have set up a panel to come out with a plan for how these water reuse certificates can be implemented. Once this water reuse certificate comes in, there can be significant push in terms of the money that will come into for reuse. And at the same time, the trading will also push the enforcing of the mandatory targets every end user has to meet in terms of reuse. Then the most critical part on the reuse that needs to happen is with respect to standards. Today, what has happened is, the multiplicity of institutions giving different standards has caused confusion. NGT itself is pushing a lot of stringent norms. 2 months back, Amrut came out with a set of standards that was, I assume, from the pressure from NGT. And at the same time, many states also have come out with their some of their own standards for the end use. But again, these standards, many times they have made it very stringent. They have not thought through, again, from the risk perspective. And most critically, what they have not thought is from the aspect of, we have many different types of treatment capacities. You have FSTP, you have STP, and you are bucketing all of them under one specific standard, which again becomes a huge challenge for these treatment plants to meet those standards. And lastly, we design these standards without thinking about the capability to monitor these standards. In the case of industrial reuse, it's very straightforward. The industries themselves can do the monitoring of their standards because it directly hits their profit and loss statement. So they know what kind of standards they require for treated wastewater. But when it comes to agriculture, we need to have some third-party agency, something like a Department of Agriculture, who can monitor how the irrigation practices are being done, what sort of crops are being irrigated, when they are irrigated. There are a whole lot that needs to be looked into that aspect. And then finally, with the current water scarcity crisis that is going across the country, we have to look at creating an environment where private investment flow can come, especially for the industrial reuse. There are already few companies and the companies who are into social investment who have brought in a lot of money, but they are struggling to actually put those money across different STP for reuse-based investment. I would end my presentation here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. Wish we had more time to discuss on these interesting insights, but there's always a next time. We'll now open the floor for questions. Most of these have already been answered in the chat box, but we'll take up a few more from the unanswered ones. So the first one could be, what are some sustainable strategies that could be adopted to tackle the pressing challenge of groundwater depletion? I would request all the speakers to kindly switch on their camera so everybody is visible to everyone. Thank you. I would repeat the question. What are some sustainable strategies that could be adopted to tackle the pressing challenge of groundwater depletion? If Vishwanath sir could answer this.
Thanks. No, so there are several strategies which are available, which means which would include understanding the lithology and the geology of what the aquifers that we are planning to recharge. As you know, the hard rock terrain that we're talking about in South India, there's complex hydrogeology at play. We need to understand it very correctly and use it. Of course, there's rainwater harvesting, there's rooftop rainwater harvesting and recharge mechanisms to pick rooftop rainwater and recharge it. I'm sure you know about that. Lakes also offer a good recharge source, but not all lakes recharge. Some of the lakes have a clay ban and don't allow for recharge. So we need to be sure about the lakes that we need to do. And one of the interesting future ideas that will come will be with reusing treated used water, as Krishna put it, for recharge. We don't have guidelines on that. We don't have norms on that, but we need to work on it. At least indirect recharge using treated used water is currently permitted because you're allowed to put treated used water into lakes and tanks, and that allows recharge. So we need to understand that. These are the strategies, but we must understand that there's no miracle that we can only extend recharge by a certain percentage. We can't push all the rainwater that we have or all the waters that we have into our aquifers so easily.
Thank you, Vishwanath sir. I hope the question has been answered. So the second question could be to Rajesh. Would a water balance differ greatly from a water audit?
Actually, it wouldn't at one level. I think what we have seen, I think it depends on if you're attempting to do it at the town level is something what we presented in. I think if you want to dig deeper into understanding what's happening at a particular area within a town or selection of wards, that's when you actually go down to actually seeing what's really happening at the OHTs and at the tanks and all the leakages. So I think if you look at it granularity, it really questions. I think the water balance doesn't differ from a water audit if you're really looking at it from town standpoint. But as you go down and, if you want to get down to more granularity at a ward level or at a water zone, typically they plan 2 to 3 wards supply to this thing. So, for example, we were thinking of doing a pilot for water metering. So we were actually trying to understand which OHT is supplying to how many wards and how to do that. But unfortunately, the problem we ran into is that there were no maps that were available, and we had to actually simply actually try to do that activity as well, which was slightly too much to take on at this point, but something we'll consider. But that's the sort of long answer to your question.
Thank you, Rajesh. We'll take just 2 more questions. The next one would be, would 24/7 be a good idea for small water deficient towns? If Jeevan could answer this.
Okay, so again, I don't have the right answer for this, but I'd just like to share the experience from our projects. So we did a pilot 24/7 water supply in Leh. The general notion in Leh was there is a huge water crisis, there's a shortage of water. So we did a similar assessment as water balance in Leh, and the outcome of this particular assessment was water is not an issue in Leh, but water management is an issue. So with this idea, we did a small piloting in one of the highest ward in Leh. And so it's been like almost 1.5 years since implementation, and it has been running smooth. And there are like certain advantages to it, this as well. So there has been reduced distribution losses in the network. The cost recovery is also doing well. And based on this model, this has been scaled up to other parts of the Leh city as well. Now this has been funded through special development package and Jal Jeevan Mission as well. So Leh is getting 24/7 water supply soon, and this is being currently planned by TCE. So I think we could also look at few other examples as well, Malkapur, etc. I think 24/7 can be like based on case-to-case basis, but definitely there are certain advantages that comes with 24/7 water supply. So I think, yeah, that's it. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeevan. So we'll just take up one last question, and this would be for Krishna. So the question is there any way to further incentivize the urban sanitation services to expand services in nearby peri-urban or rural areas?
It's a strange question. I don't see a specific incentive for peri-urban and urban areas because the incentive has to be same. So you need to ensure 100% of used water in the city is treated. But how it gets treated, you need to figure out based on what the local condition and situation are and what people have already invested in. It is very, in the periphery region, peri-urban regions, typically people go for on-site sanitation system. And now by, pushing down sewer, it throws a, strange challenge. We have already spent so much by these people. They have addressed, they're addressing to what somewhat level with the black water. We just need to look at, simple solutions, how they can manage their, since they have already invested in black water management, how they can plan for their gray water. That's how we need to look at it in simple way. And it's a very contextual specific response. You can't have incentives there, that I would say. It has to be a pan city plan.
Thank you so much, sir. Due to time constraints, we will answer any remaining questions via email and we'll ensure to respond promptly. I would like to thank all of you for your enthusiastic participation and engagement throughout the webinar. Before we conclude, I'd like to invite Mr. Gautam Lahari, Executive Director of TIDE, to deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Sapna. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
All right. Wonderful. I would just start by saying that the study and this discourse couldn't have come at a better time. So thank you. It was the last 90 minutes or so has been very insightful and engaging. So thank you very much and good evening to everyone. So firstly, our sincere thank goes out to BMZ and DCB Bank for supporting us conducting this study and the publication thereof that you have been sort of witnessing it for the last 90 minutes or so. We also thank Chintamani CMC for their support as well. Our thank goes out to BORDA and Well Labs for this wonderful and innovative collaboration that had helped us to sort of come up and conduct and publish this study. So thank you very much. Last but not the least, sincere thank to our esteemed panelists. So Madhavi, Vishwanath sir, Krishna Rao sir, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing such deep insights and your pragmatic views on the topic and beyond as well. Thank you very much. Of course, Jeevan and Rajesh, you opened up the whole presentation and walked us through the study, right? It was wonderful to hear your point of view and your summary and insights as well. As they say, data are just summaries of thousands of stories. So it was covered very well. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the participants for patiently listening and engaging and reflecting on the topic. We would like your continued participation and engagement with us. So thank you very much. And finally, TIDE, through its innovative and decentralized wash interventions, would like to engage and partner with organizations in this wash space to implement and scale our work in small towns across Karnataka and beyond. Thank you very much, everyone. I know we're standing between your evening and the presentation. So thank you very much and have a pleasant evening. Back to you, Sapna.
Thank you very much, Gautam sir. And thank you to all our speakers as well as the participants for joining us today. For those who may have missed out any part of the webinar or wish to revisit the discussions, a recording will be available shortly on the YouTube link that has been shared in the chat box. So let's continue working together to create water secure towns in India. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.